So yeah, the concept is that basically the active tones are active over whatever harmony is being prolonged. So it's pretty straightforward if you just have one chord, you know. But when you've got multiple chords, it really depends on what you're maintaining as the overall harmony. But it's one of those things that's kind of fluid. So that's a general rule. Like if you're going to write a melody and you don't know what the harmony is going to be yet.
Right, that was my other question because I know some people write the melody first, and so yeah.
Yeah. So let's say that you were to write. In fact, why don't I'm going to bring up my screen. Okay. And actually, I'm starting to dive into this a little bit more because I I have a gut feeling the next course I'm going to do is harmony and counterpoint and voice leading
That's
after the
exciting.
sonata form. So, but let's just say we write a simple melody.
Okay.
Um, I'm just going to do whatever here. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. Oh, that was a lot slower than I was good. What I meant was this. Okay. Delete all that. Okay, one more time. Okay, so there's nothing extremely complex about this. Obviously, I've got a scale line moving down right here. And I'm trying to maintain the concept with these active tones. So if you've got an active tone, I'm getting feedback on my mic. It's like making my brain think
Oh, I
slow.
hate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I sound slower today, it's because of the mic.
Right.
But so okay, so if we think about these rules, normally the leading tone has to go up, right? The
By
sixth
half
goes
step.
down to fifth, yeah, by half steps. So it leads up to the tonic. The sixth goes down to the fifth. The fourth obviously goes to the third.
Right.
But one of the rules also is that you can disregard that tendency by approaching it from the opposite direction. So in this case, because we're approaching this B from a step up, we can just continue that momentum down and it still feels fine. It doesn't feel like we've cheated anything.
Okay.
Um, now, these are kind of idealistic rules. In reality, you could do whatever you want. I could go like this, but it doesn't now feel like we're in C major anymore. It actually feels like we've moved to G major. And that's just kind of what these rules are about, is that if you want to still maintain the feeling of the key that you're in, um, you stick to the rules and you're pretty much not going to get in trouble, right?
Oh, yeah.
But they're not rules in the sense of you have to stick to them. You could still make it work. So for this simple one, I'm just going to put that, and we'll see how this sounds. That works, right? Now, if we were to break the rule, so in this case, that should go like that. Just because of that tendency, we're not approaching it from above. So technically, it shouldn't sound as smooth or as logical. I would say, I mean, Obviously, I'm using this as an example, but I would say, in fact, it doesn't sound as smooth. It doesn't sound like it goes as well. Would you agree?
Right. Yeah. I can hear that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and overall, I think it still works even with that broken rule there because we're maintaining all the other rules. So I still have 6 going down to 5. I've got 4 going down to 3. And when you jump up, I still maintain. Now, in fact, because, well, actually, no, because I leap, we still have to go back down. And that's one of the other rules. If you leap, you should fill it in by moving in the other direction. Um, but
Okay.
overall, because I stick to all those other rules, I think it still worked, but it wasn't quite as smooth. So now, though, if we were to change this harmony and make it a little bit more complex,
Hmm.
um, you'll see that the melody still works in the same way, and it's because we're prolonging tonic overall through this entire thing. So um, if I were to change this to, right, so we haven't gotten anything crazy here. It's just 151.
Okay.
And this is a bit heavy. Why don't I do something like that? Actually, this is not great to do either because generally you shouldn't double the third in a chord.
Right.
However, counterpoint wise, technically it still works because even though there's octaves here, we've moved in um, with contrary motion. So here you're coming down, here you're going up. So let's see what this sounds like. I would say it still works, and we still are following the same rules, even though we've changed the harmony.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
and in fact, we can continue this line up, something like that, um, and it'll still work. Now I went to 5 there. Obviously, 1 5 1 5. It's easy to do here. Um, but let's see what we could also. Let's see. If we change this to a I don't know what I'm going to do here. Yeah, I think I'll keep it like that. So in this case, I've changed this to a 6 chord, right?
Right.
Um, but technically, because the notes still work with the harmony, like I'm making sure that I'm hitting a chord tone on the strong beat. So because it's an E, and E is a member of the 6 chord. And in fact, you know what? Just to make this a little bit stronger, uh, I'm going to put an A in the bass. This obviously is not really playable on piano because it's too big of a spread. Let's just hear what this sounds like.
Okay.
Now, this note here should be harmonized in a slightly better way, um, but you can tell it still worked. The melody
Yeah.
up to this point still works, even though I've now what sounds like I've abandoned the C major. I mean, we don't have any C major in here. The rules still work, and overall, it's because we're prolonging this same C major harmony throughout.
Okay, that makes tons of sense. Yeah, I was really confusing myself because I was going to a 4 chord and I'm like, oh no, there's now like a whole set of different like scale degrees if you're looking at F. And anyway, I was getting super
Yeah.
confused. So this,
Well,
yeah, this
why don't we
makes sense.
continue it then? We'll see. Um, we'll see where this goes. So we'll take it to 4, right? Um, and then if we were to just copy this, uh, this may still work. And the reason is because if we were to go to 4 here, right, chances are, with no other chords there, um, we're going to move back to a 1 chord. Just because that chord makes sense through voice leading. Something like that would happen. So let's just hear what this sounds like. It's not the greatest melody. I mean, it gets kind of boring when you just repeat it like that exactly, and it doesn't feel like it's really going anywhere, but it still feels like it works, and it's because overall, from here to here, we've prolonged tonic harmony.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, that's way easier than I thought it was.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and that's the point of these rules. And I know I get away from saying rules in the course because people freak out about that. I mean, they're guidelines for you to be composing your melodies. They're a place to start.
Right.
Obviously, people break these all the time, and it works just fine. And it comes down to, is your ear telling you that this is right?
Right.
If we were to change this to a B flat, so why don't we do this? So now we've done a quick modulation here. So I don't know what this is going to sound kind of cool, I think, with the D up in the melody. But here we've modulated, and
So now you're not.
this becomes now a 1-5. However, well, yeah, this will still. I think this will all still work. It feels a little like it's getting ahead of itself. Like we modulate real quick to F and then move back to C. It doesn't feel like it's thought out very well. But we're still generally maintaining the rules. However, we are breaking a couple, or not breaking the rules, but by having a G on a strong beat. So on beat 3, we're not very clearly outlining the harmony. So it doesn't quite feel as smooth to me. And by moving straight back to C, um, it feels like this is almost like a mistake. This F major with a B flat in it, you know.
So then,
So
I mean, as far as scale degrees now, if you modulate, I mean, now the C is the fifth scale degree, right?
yeah, C is the fifth scale degree. So this is not an ideal melody.
I was just trying to analyze, just because I'm still trying to get my head around being able to even analyze, okay, which direction is it supposed to go, and resolve to which note. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just hard to see it still. Like, okay, that leap is supposed to go down to this one or whatever.
Yeah, so whatever you're viewing here, just imagine that that is the current key that you're in. Um, and it's just a matter of repetition and, as much as it sucks, rote memorization sometimes. So you just have to get really familiar with the keys and know that if you're an F major, B flat is the fourth, G is the second, D is the sixth, and then E obviously is like that. So in this case, this will probably work a little bit better. So let's hear what this sounds like. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know if it really works that much better. This feels a little bit awkward in here.
The idea was that then you leap down so that then you resolve up to 1, right? From 7 to 1.
Yeah, so that you're resolving. So and what you'll find a lot of times is it's just a matter of playing around with ideas until they work.
Okay.
So maybe let's see what that sounds like. I think that was a little bit smoother than the last one.
Yeah.
And it just was, I'm going to really connect it in a smooth way with the scale here. Um, Meaning that this E didn't just pop out of nowhere, where I felt like when we leap to the E from the G in the last example, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't quite make sense to have this E in here.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So yeah, that's the tendency tone. So now the other rules, and in fact, let me see if I can pull all these up here. I'm trying to think where I've got them in here. I would say probably the most important ones are making sure that you're outlining the harmony in a clear way, right? So, if anything, 1 and 3 should generally be chord tones. Those are all chord tones here. And that leads to, it you can clearly feel the harmony, even though I took out the left hand, and that's simply because we're outlining that harmony.
Oh,
Um, so I would say the other key rule that you want to stick to um, is leaping rules, like sticking to filling in leaps.
mhm.
Let's see, what's a good leap here? Let's do something like that. So notice here, every time I leap up, I fill it in, meaning that I move down by step. And filling it in is just basically um, going back down a little bit. You don't have to completely fill in the entire leap. Now, a lot of times, if you try to, you can come up with a very satisfying melody. Um, and then it really becomes a matter of playing around with things.
Yeah. Okay.
So oh, I didn't even change the harmony. Um, so we'll do that. We'll just ignore all this stuff. I'm kind of done with that. So even though it's quite leapy, by making sure that I turn in the opposite direction and try to fill in the leaps as best as possible, I think it works as a melody.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Yeah, that's
yeah.
really helpful to watch that. Okay.
Although I mean, this is where the study of counterpoint can be very good, because after I wrote it, I noticed that I have a leap after a step. So now this is kind of a nitpicky rule, and it's more of a Baroque kind of thing. And even Bach will leap after a step. But kind of as a first level counterpoint rule, you should not leap after a step. You should you should go leap step instead of step leap. And the way my counterpoint teacher taught us, he said that imagine you're on a little island and you're trying to, or you're on a little, island in a puddle and you're trying to get to the outside of the puddle. If you take a step and then leap, you're in the water. If you leap and then step, you're on dry land. So as
That's a
his
fun way to.
little, yeah.
How
So you want to stay out of the water.
how would you do that though? Because you're always going to be either coming from a step or a leap. Like I'm not quite sure how you would actually do that.
So this is the thing, though. It's in the same direction. So I leapt in the same direction. You can leap in an opposite direction. Basically, changing direction is what cancels that out.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. So, and once you go into all those details, the island metaphor starts to break down. So I wouldn't put too much credence in islands, but
Just a good way to remember it though.
yeah, it's
So
a good way to remember it.
okay, so wait,
So
say that again now. So the rule is that you don't leap after a step if it's the same direction.
Yeah, so whatever direction you're going in, once you make a step, you either have to change direction or you just maintain stepping. So you don't want to leap. So in this case, going from, I leap up to E, right? And I change direction. So now I'm stepping, but I leap to G in the same direction. So that is technically not allowed. Now I have a couple options here. I can go like, I can just change that to a step, right? Let's hear what this sounds like. That works. Um, I could leap up, so I'm changing direction. So I'm creating a V right here, and then change this note. And for this, if I want to hit the E here, I'll have to change this to a half note. It's not as graceful. I like that dotted quarter with an eighth feel, but let's listen to what this sounds like. I think it works. By losing that dotted quarter and an eighth, I feel like it loses a lot of momentum.
Right.
It just kind of slows down right here. So I could do something like, so now I'm continuing stepwise down, but I'm maintaining a rhythmic feel. And actually, I'm using the same rhythmic motive here, so it ties in a little bit better. So that's kind of the way you really do get good at writing melodies, is kind of figuring out alternatives that fit within the rules, and um, figuring out when you want to break those rules.
Right.
But if you were to sit down, a great study in melody are the Bach two-part inventions. Um, and the reason is because, one, they're only single lines, so um, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not a, that stuff. So he's sticking with single lines, but he's also really developing his motives very clearly, and it's beyond just he actually he'll augment them. He'll stretch them out. He'll change the interval pattern, but maintain the overall motive and make it work together.
Wow.
But the main reason is because he sticks tightly to these rules with very few exceptions. So, right, there's no step leap there in the same direction. Or, for instance, that's a good example because he's sticking to multiple rules. So he's not having the augmented second, which is kind of considered a no-no in Baroque music. Um, so he leaps down, leaps back up, but it's all changing direction, so it all fits within the rules. Whatever it is. Yeah, reading through those, learning to play them, copying them out by hand is a really great exercise. And one of the best exercises you can do is, without studying really any counterpoint, copy out like bar by bar or 2 or 3 bars at a time, and try to write something that uses his exact same harmony and feels the same but is different. And you'll learn a lot. And especially if you take the time to notice, okay, what intervals are working over each other, and you'll notice, oh, he always has thirds, he has sixths, not a lot of octaves in there, not a lot of open fifths on beats. You start to put together these rules through your own discovery, and I think they sink in a little bit better. So that's an exercise I would recommend for everybody.
Is that something that I can access online, like the Bach two-part inventions?
Yeah, they're all over the place. I mean, you can go to IMSLP. If you just type in Bach two-part inventions, obviously there's probably 100,000 recordings of it on YouTube. Um, and just taking the time to play through it will kind of expand your capabilities on piano. He originally wrote them as fingering exercises, which just makes me feel kind of bad about myself. It's like he's just like, oh, let me write out these fingering exercises that people are going to be studying for the next 500 years, you know.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
but he also wrote them in mind that he wanted his students to have good models for composition. So he's using all sorts of techniques in those that make them very deep compositions, even though they're I wouldn't call them simple, but they're very clear and you know not very uh, overly complicated. He just gets to right to the core of what you need to do.
Right, right, right. Okay, yeah, that's fascinating actually, that idea of leaps and steps, just because I feel like uh when I started writing, I really went with that. I mean, all I had was intuitive
Yeah,
musical ability, and so I found the process of writing extremely stressful.
yeah,
And I actually have completely set aside all my, you know, well, actually, I pretty much have finished all the pieces that I was working on. And so while I've been working through this course, I just thought I just want to 100% focus on the ability to be intentional and developing
yeah,
skills. And then I'll go back to trying to apply it to big works, because that was just too overwhelming. But as I've learned these different parts, like, yeah, so much of it is coming together and making sense of, like, I don't know, principles that I could kind of sense, but I wouldn't be able to articulate, or like, I
yeah,
know there's
yeah.
got to be rules here, but I don't know what they are. And so,
And the thing is, a lot of the stuff is not taught in the way of how can this be useful for a composer. Like when I was going through college, um, it just was all the theory they were teaching us was never connected to, okay, this is how you can actually turn around and compose real music uh, with it, like all the voice leading exercise. And I found that very frustrating.
yeah, I'm sure.
Um, but what would be kind of a fun exercise is to see how this stuff works, even without having to hear it, right? So I muted the piano here, so we can't hear what it's going to sound like,
Uh-huh.
and we're just going to use pure theory. So I think this will be kind of a fun exercise to see. Um, so I think the first thing to start off with would be, at least in this case, to write a simple chord progression.
Right.
Um, and a good way to do this is actually through uh, writing it out, just the chords first, so not touching any notation. Um, and just for clarity's sake, I'm going to, let's see, I'll start with the actual, maybe I'll start with Roman numerals, and then we'll pick a key and we'll work from there. So, so probably in this case, we're just going to start with one because we're not trying to rock the boat here. Um, Now, if we were to follow the chart, and in fact, I'll pull up the chart here. Okay, so we know if we're starting at one, basically we can go this way, right? So it's just a matter of picking chords. So we can, why don't we go 1, 2, 6, or why don't we do this? We'll do a 5 of 6 to a 6 to a 2, 6. Now I do 2, 6 just because it's the most common, of when you see 2, 6 or two in a cadence. Most of the time, it's actually a an inversion, first inversion.
Okay.
Um, so 4, 5, 1 may be kind of what everybody thinks of as the quintessential cadence, but 2, 6, 5, 1 is actually more common.
Okay.
Um, and why don't we make this a half cadence? So we're going to make that a 5 chord there. And remember, half cadences, now we're talking pure classical music here, are never seventh chords. They're never dominant sevenths. They're just pure dominant triads. And the thought behind that is that when you add the seventh, the tendency becomes too strong and you don't actually get the restful state that a cadence gives you. So you just have a pure dominant. It feels like you're stopping on the dominant as opposed to passing through the dominant and ultimately moving towards the one with more force.
Okay.
Um, so that's what we've done there, and that's kind of like our first phrase, right? And we can, why don't we call this an antecedent? So it helps to have notation, uh, Sibelius skills. What notation program do you use?
I use Finale Songwriter.
Okay. Mm. Regardless of what you use, I recommend learning it well, especially if you like to flesh things out in Finale, because knowing all, like, memorize as many of the keyboard shortcuts as you can.
Okay.
It just makes it working it much smoother and takes up less brain power in the end.
Okay.
Um, so we've got the first phrase here. And because we know that we're doing a period now, um, we're probably going to have a repetition of the basic idea because we've got a basic idea. We have a contrasting idea. It ends in a weak cadence. Then we have a repetition of the basic idea. And then we have a new contrasting idea that ends in a strong cadence. So we can go ahead and go wrong. 2, 6, 5, 7, 1. Okay. So we've got that going. Now, we could either write the melody. I probably don't need to say it. We could either write the melody. That was a muscle memory thing. And it's probably a good muscle memory thing to do. I always hit Command S or Control S if you're on Windows, like automatically anytime I kind of finish a thought. And the idea is that you never lose your work. So
Yeah.
I recommend, I'm sure that's nothing new for most people now, but so we'll just call it practice. Okay, so we could turn this into a bass line just to give us a concept of what this is going to sound like. But don't forget, I muted everything. And we'll just work from C major because everybody understands C major.
Mm-hmm.
And, just to make this look right, I'm going to just do this real quick. That wasn't there. So we can put that in. We'll change this to half notes. So C, then we're going to have E, A. Let's see.
Do you feel like now you're pretty equally versed in all the different keys, or do you feel like it's still kind of you have to push through some of the ones that are less familiar to you at this point?
Yeah, I think unless you spend a lot of time in the more remote keys, anything beyond like B major and D flat major, they're always going to be tricky. Um, but it shouldn't be, like if I'm in D flat major, I don't have to think super hard. It's kind of low. I don't have to think super hard what 5 is. I know it's going to be A flat, right? Super low again.
Yeah.
If I'm in B major, I don't have to think hard that I'm going to F sharp. It should be at least on that level. Now, modulating within the keys to foreign keys, when you start to throw in double sharps, double flats, and things get messy, that, we're all human, and it's hard to keep things straight sometimes,
Yeah.
especially once you add orchestration in the mix, which is one of the reasons why I don't recommend orchestrating pieces until you've got a decent grasp on just at least basic theory and form, because it just adds a whole nother layer of complexity. Even in a program like Sibelius, if you add a bunch of instruments, you're scrolling up and down just to see what all your instruments are doing. So it becomes very complex at that point.
Right.
But you should at least be able to say, what 1, 2, 4, and 5 are in the remote keys without having to think too hard about it. But the best way around that is to have kind of a cheat sheet. So if, let's say you want to write a piece in B major, um, sit down and write out the scale by hand, write out a couple, chord progressions in B major with cadences, do some modal borrowing, like prep yourself beforehand so that when you actually sit down to do the work, you've got like a reference sheet,
Right.
you've you've front loaded it. It could be that you're going to spend a week on B major or on a piece in B major, and the first day you don't do any composing, you just work through a couple of these mental equations of what is B major.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'll be in a much better place when you actually sit down to compose. You probably won't even have to reference it. um, so
Right.
that also goes a lot into saying um, working with the piano and practicing these things to the point where there's muscle memory involved. um, you know, if I'll turn that up for a second. For some of these keys, A major, I don't have to think about what I got to do to go 1 4 1. I've played these chords so much. B major, right? C minor, F sharp major. Little less use there. It's a little bit slower. D major, G. Oh, sorry. And practicing the chord progressions that you use on a regular basis. So, uh, that's basically the same as with a slightly different bass line. But actually sitting down, and that's why I put the piano worksheets in there, is so um, you can take the time to try to make this muscle memory.
Probably go back and work on those.
Say that again.
I should probably go back and work on those because I
Yeah,
think the functional harmony section especially, I was like, holy cow, I do not know my keys as well as I thought I did. I mean, I played
yeah.
piano for years and years and years, but I never have really like been super intentional about what key I'm in and what chords they are. I mean, you
and
just
and
play it.
thinking in that key.
Yeah,
Uh,
I never
yeah.
have. So yeah, that's probably a really good idea to go back and do some of that.
So yeah, and it's not a overnight kind of thing. It's not going to be like I'm going to work on this for a week and never have to work on it again. It's one of those things that you should just start sight reading stuff in different keys on the piano on a regular basis. So get a book of stuff, and that's why once again the two-part inventions. I mean, they hit most of the keys. They're great exercises for many, many, many reasons. But
Okay.
okay, so let's continue here. So we've got basically the same thing, right? And here we got E, we got A, and I'm just doing an octave there to keep up the momentum. Then we got 2 5 1, right? So I'm pretty sure that's going to work. Um, Now, a good way, one of the reasons why I start with chord tone melodies is because we can basically outline the shape of our melody in a simple way. We can start with that first. So, so why don't we do this? We'll go, we'll start up here. Why don't we do,
The
see.
6 of 5 is D major, is that right? Or am I off? Oh wait,
5 of 6 is an E major.
oh, the 5 of 6. That's right. Okay, so
Yeah, yeah. So we've got a 5 of 6 right here, going to 6, just so you can hear that. I'm trying to do this to show you that the theory works even without using your ears. It's going to work, but just the progression is going to be. right? That's what that will sound like.
Okay.
So I'll mute this here. But so far, only chord tones: C, C, E, B, C, A. Oh, why don't we do A? And this will probably change as we go along. We'll pick different chord tones once we start to flesh out the melody with, quarter notes and eighth notes and connecting things and changing around. So it's all kind of a fluid process.
Yeah.
But we can do. That's way high. D, A, D. And then why don't we do B? So we know basically we can copy this, and then we got to come up with a new contrasting idea. So we could do D, A, B, B, C. What the heck? Okay, so we've got a decent outline for things. At this point, we can now start to flesh this out a little bit. So we can add some steps here. C, D, E, B. Why don't we go? Let's see. Get crazy here. Just this may not sound good. D, C, B. So I am doing a little turn of phrase here it's not necessarily like, oh, we're leaping and we're figuring out things. It's just a common rhythm. Da 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 da, right? But we're still sticking to rules in general. So we leap down, we change direction, we continue by step, we step up, and then we can leap down because we've changed direction.
So with the B to the D on the 16th notes, how is it that you can skip kind of going up to C to resolve the B?
Okay, so one of the things we're doing here is we are outlining the harmony still. So we call this a 7 chord, right? Now we are really hitting a lot of chord tones. And this is one of the things that you work on in Counterpoint is being able to outline the harmony real clearly. So my teacher would say, you haven't outlined things clear enough because you need to have a third in there. So we could even change this to a G sharp. Like that. And in fact, why don't we listen to this? So we'll take away the mystery and see what this sounds like. Now, the rhythms, it may feel a little bit weird, but.
That's cool.
And in fact, I think this will work changing that to a 7. So this is now a 7th chord, but because it is an inversion, it is a 5, 4, 2 chord. So a 4-2 chord puts the 7th in the bass.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And inversions is one of those things that just like you got to do a lot to remember that. And I forget all the time. I was like, is it a 4-2 or 4-3? Okay. But effectively, you know that when you do this, you're going to be leading to the third of this chord right here. So. It slows down a bit here, so we're gonna modify this melody. But I think overall this works.
Yeah.
And we compose this without really listening to it, without using our ears. It's purely theory-based, purely notation-based, but it's a great starting point. And sometimes, you come back the next day and you're like, oh, I just want to change this now to a figure like this. And all of a sudden it makes all the difference and the melody comes together in a great way. So we can start to add harmony here though. In fact, why don't we just do a second voice on here? So we'll do, so we'll add the third. We'll add, not too happy with this.
So how does the G sharp, what do you call that as far as the rules of resolving that one? Because that one's out of...
So basically, we're Taunus sizing A minor. So when you Taunus size something, you're just for a moment jumping out of that key. So if we were to kind of write this out over here. Change that to half notes. So these two chords right here are in the, or actually this key or this chord is still in the key of C major. So A minor is a 6th chord, right? It's this one chord that's actually in the key of A minor. So we treat this G major or this G sharp as a leading tone to A. But because we leap out of it and we remain in chord tones, so we basically cancel out the requirement for this note to resolve itself, because we've had so many chord tones in the way that the last chord tone now becomes the note that we have to resolve, which is the B. And that's what makes it feel like it's still working.
If we
and the reason
to...
that...
Sorry,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask...
Okay.
Go ahead first.
Okay, the reason that works is because let's pretend that we don't have this figure right here, but we have just a simple arpeggio. I don't have a full keyboard, so I can never remember which octave I'm in.
Oh, I have the same problem.
Yeah. I'm going to delete all this. It just got messed up. None of those have to resolve at this point, because we can just go up and down chord tones, and that's the point of that rule, is you can just do this all day long. As soon as we put in a tendency tone, and let's say over here we're going to A minor, then we have to think about how it resolves. But we're not worried about where's this G sharp going. We're only worried about that last tendency tone. If, on the other hand, we go, let's see, that doesn't work, we have to resolve that G sharp to the A. So that's kind of the concept here, is that because we're leaping within the chord, it really wants to resolve that B to the A. To the C, the B to the C. So and in fact, because B is 2 in A minor, we could easily do that as well. So let's hear what that sounds like for a second. Which that makes that feel a little empty, so we change that. How do we do this? Something like that.
So if
this
you
counter line is not great, but
if you did end on the G sharp as the last note, then you would have to resolve it.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? Okay, so do you spot the mistake here? I'm just curious. I'm setting you up for failure. I'm sorry. we have an augmented second here, right? Which in traditional, melodic writing is considered an awkward leap or an awkward step, right? Because they're actually a minor third apart or an augmented second. So in this case, we would use the melodic minor, the ascending melodic minor scale. So let's hear what this sounds like now. However, I've set myself up for failure. Oh, maybe not actually, because these are all leaps. This feels a little awkward.
Not changing direction after the leap.
It's not changing. It doesn't feel like it's a very smooth line. What it feels like is this E is kind of dangling on its own, that doesn't work because we have a step into a leap. So you can see how complicated counterpoint can be and why it's something that you kind of have to be ready for it. You've got to have a good grasp of functional harmony before counterpoint really starts to make sense, because you have to play around with solutions while maintaining the correct harmony.
Yeah, that's tricky. I kind of go back and forth between the rules feeling really helpful and like way easier and like super complex and like blowing my brain.
Yeah. So, but that's why it helps to start from points that right? So we started with creating a chord progression that followed this chart. And then we started from just adding chord tones. And because basically with chord tones, you're forced to leap almost all the time unless it's moving from one chord to another. At that point, you're resolving the right chord tone to the right next chord tone.
Right.
Basically, it's a simple way to write a melody. It doesn't get you into hot water. And then from there, you practice connecting things in a way that maintains those melodic rules. And it becomes more of a second nature kind of thing. So if I'm sitting down to practice this, I'll go through like I'm going through right now and change it around, and I'll try different solutions. But if I'm sitting down to just compose a piece, if I just sit down and I'm going to write something, and I'm not going to really think about the rules. I'm just going to think about what I feel is working at the time. And that's the goal, is to internalize this stuff so that the rules become a natural part of the way you think melodically, and not so much a a thing that you have to force your melody to fit.
Okay, that's really helpful to say. Yeah, that makes sense, but that's not necessarily the way I was thinking of it, so that's helpful.
Yeah. And that's the goal with all this stuff, the functional harmony chart. You can break these things sometimes, and it'll still work just fine. But it usually only works when somebody understands how the rules are working and where they can go outside the rules. Like
Right.
for instance, you've got nothing on here that says you can move from one to a flat major third to one again, but that works to our ears. I mean, that's Lord of the Rings right there. That's basically what.
True.
I mean, I can't remember what the rest of the progression is, but that's the cowboy progression. So then you go to a B flat, G7, kind of the adventure cadence, and you'll hear it in all over the place. It's in Star Wars in the main theme. It's in Magnificent Seven, any cowboy movie, So,
That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea too, just to even like listen to the Lord of the Rings theme and write it out, or the Star Wars theme, or whatever.
Let's see. Let's see.
Nice.
Let's see. What is the? No, that's not right. Maybe. Oh, let me take that down on an octave. So. something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of benefit in transcribing and even just trying to play by ear, not writing it out. You're just causing that feedback loop. Um, what you hear in your brain versus what you see on the page
Right.
versus what the reality of the music is.
Well, and that's a good idea too, because I have never been one to really do much by ear itself. I mean, like really in the last year with the composing, I've done some, but that's not ever been something I've been very good at, like
Yeah.
listening and then just transposing. I mean, I tend to be a lot more of a black and white thinker and a very like, I don't know, I've always just read the music or
Yeah. And
whatever.
there's a lot of benefit in just if you're do you have a piano at home or
I do.
just sit at the piano and have your kids tell you like simple tunes to play, you know, uh, Old McDonald, right? Just going through that is an exercise in brain feedback, musical transcription skills.
Right.
And it's kind of fun. It's kind of like name that tune, but then take it another step and transpose it. So why don't we do it? So now we're in A major. Right? And then why don't we do D flat? Oh, see, there we go. Got to think about this for a second. That's a
Nice.
brain workout, and it's a simple piece. It doesn't have to be super complex, but and that's a great way to get familiar with the keys. Take a little melody like that and play it through all keys.
True. Okay.
So
That's
I've
great.
overwhelmed you with things to do now.
No, no, no. I'm not overwhelmed at all. Yeah, I told my husband not too long ago that this is exactly where I was at with my music to be able to really like have the discipline and assignments and everything that goes with all the things I've been trying to work on. And
Yeah,
I just didn't know what I didn't know for so long that it was like I had to search and search on the internet to find like, oh yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. And now I can learn that. And so
yeah,
no, this
yeah,
is really, really helpful. It gives me good direction on what to work
yeah.
on.
So, and the ultimate goal of this stuff is to raise the level of our happy accidents. So, a happy accident for Beethoven is an amazing, genius masterwork move that we're not quite there. A happy accident for us, maybe, ooh, that's kind of a cool sound, But in the reality, somebody's already figured it out. So, we're just trying to, you know, expand our possibilities for what we can discover. Because
Right.
once you understand all this stuff, then you start to really push your limits. You're like, I wonder if I could do, a one chord and then move to a flat two while still maintaining one in the bass. You're like, oh, that's kind of a cool sound, you know. But I also know that's a Phrygian scale. That's just moving up the Phrygian, kind of the Spanishy thing. So everything you can explain everything away, but part of the fun is just figuring it out on your own and then trying to backwards work. What is the theory here? You know?
Right. Okay, well that's really really helpful. I probably better get off, but thank you
Yeah,
so
I
much.
probably should too. My son's got basketball, so
Awesome. Very good. Thank you so much for your help with all this.
yeah. No, this was a good one. I'm glad you got on here because I post these, and I don't know if people are watching the old episodes, but this seems like a particularly useful one for people. So I may
Okay.
take this recording and put it on the actual melodic rules lesson because I think it explains a lot.
Yeah, it was very helpful.
So
Okay.
okay, well, have a good rest of your weekend,
Thank you.
and
Okay.
I'll hopefully see you next week.
Yeah. Okay. Bye bye.